Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Using Secondary Sources. I'm Olivia, one of your presenters today. And before we get started, I want to note that we will be doing our best to leave time at the end of this webinar to answer any questions. If you have any questions during the presentation, I ask that you type your question in the Q&A box and send it to all panelists. If your Q&A box does not immediately show up, click the button at the bottom of your screen that looks like a talk bubble with a question mark in it, and it'll open the Q&A. If we don't have time to answer all questions, however, please send any additional inquiries you have to the Law Library's Ask a Librarian service. There is a link to Ask a Librarian at the top of law.gov and a copy of the link on the last slide. We will also email the slides at the end of class, but if you have trouble with that, again, just send in a request for a copy through Ask a Librarian. Next slide. Okay, again, so welcome to Using Secondary Sources in Legal Research. I'm Olivia Kane-Cruz, a legal reference librarian at the Law Library of Congress, and I am joined today by...
My name is Linnea Eberhardt, and I am the current librarian in residence in the Law Library.
All right, so before diving into this presentation, we would like to provide you with a roadmap of the things we're going to cover. So first, we will provide you with an explanation of what secondary sources are. Then we will discuss when to use your secondary sources. And finally, how to access secondary sources for your research. Next slide. Okay, so as you've probably guessed from the title of this presentation, we are going to be focusing on secondary sources today. However, I would like to provide context to how secondary sources are part of the legal research method, because legal research makes a very important distinction between primary and secondary sources. So primary authorities are published in primary sources, and as you see here on the slide, primary authority is the law itself. And when we say the law itself, we are talking about legislation, so statutes, court opinions like case law, regulations like administrative rules, and constitutions. So official primary sources are typically published by the enacting government, while unofficial primary sources are published by commercial publishers. Okay, so secondary authority provides commentary, analysis, and explanations about primary authorities. And secondary authority is published in what we call secondary sources. These secondary sources are published by people who are experts, but who don't necessarily have authority to create the law. So for example, professors or lawyers. Secondary sources include treatises, horn books, legal encyclopedias, law review articles, restatements, and nutshells, which if you don't know what any of those are, don't worry, that we're going to be discussing that in our presentation. So we recommend starting your research with secondary sources, especially if you're researching an unfamiliar area of the law. And you may think, well, that seems like a bit backwards to start your legal research with secondary sources rather than primary sources, but secondary sources help bridge the gap. They help to explain basic concepts and cite to primary sources, which will help you to expand your research. And they can also help you generate keywords to use when searching through primary sources of law. Next slide. So now that you know you should start your legal research with secondary sources, you may now ask yourself, which secondary sources should I start with? Well, that depends, because there is no single right way that is going to work for every research situation. The better approach is to gain an understanding of when secondary sources can be the most useful, and learning which secondary sources are the most effective for the type of legal research that you're doing. So here on the slide, this inverted pyramid you see here provides a visual of the different types of secondary sources and how legal research methods follow a funnel approach of moving from general to more specific sources. So, for example, if you're entirely new to an area of law and need to get some orientation, you can go to the legal dictionary or a legal encyclopedia. When you are maybe a bit more familiar with an area of law, but the subject matter is more narrow, you could reach for one of the treatises or books. And when you want to learn more about a specific legal rule in an area of the law, you could grab a restatement of the law. And when you want to see what lawyers in your jurisdiction are saying and doing, or want to learn more about an area of the law that is still developing, you could reach for a law review article or bar journal. And although they're not part of the research funnel, as you can see here, research guides and legal directories, research guides are useful to getting started, and legal directories can be helpful once you've reached the bottom of the funnel and need to know where to look next. Okay, so now I'm going to hand you off to Linnea to discuss research guides.
Great. Thanks, Olivia. So before we dive into the secondary sources themselves, we're going to take a look at library research guides, which can help you identify secondary sources relevant to your research. As the name implies, library research guides are librarian-curated toolkits of resources and information on a specific subject, with the goal of providing you with a starting point for your research. They are usually specific to a particular subject of law, like animal law or contract law, but can also focus on how to use certain resources or even how to conduct legal research in general. I can tell you from personal experience that these guides are invaluable, and I use them all the time in responding to questions on areas of law I'm not familiar with, or even to remind myself of the different resources available. Specifically, I've been using the Law Library of Congress's guides, which are a great tool to navigate the resources available both here at the library and online. We've added a link to our website, law.gov, here, so you can take a look at the different services and resources offered by the library. And if you didn't already know, the Law Library of Congress is actually the largest law library in the world with more than 5 million items in its collections. We have over 2 football fields worth of shelving, not to mention the digital collections and other online resources we have access to. From those stats alone, it can honestly be a little overwhelming how much information is available, which is why I found the library's research guides to be a great starting point when researching a new area of law. As a reference librarian, I use research guides every day to help answer questions. For example, I might refer someone to research guides on, let me pull up my annotation tool here, or not. Well, you can see it right there on the slide. We might use ones like how to find free case law online, which is a popular one if you're not able to make it to a library, but you still need to do your case research. Additionally, compiling a federal legislative history, a beginner's guide is a popular one and one that I actually consult all the time myself when getting into the historical research. I've included a few of our more popular guides listed on the slide, but the library has many more. Currently, we have 331 guides on a variety of legal subjects, from American Indian law to Social Security disability law. Our guides also cover how to research specific resources in the library, like our collection of Supreme Court records and briefs. Research guides can be a big time saver when researching a new topic because it's like a one-stop shop of helpful resources, so you don't have to spend time going through the hundreds of different options because a librarian has already done that for you. Guys got a little sneak peek of this one earlier, but this is the homepage for the Law Library's research guides, which are all available online. We've included the URL for the Law Library's index of research guides on the slide, and we'll also provide a link in the chat so that you can follow along with our tour of the guides if you'd like and refer to it later when conducting your research. And if you're ever not sure how to get back to this page, all you need to do is remember that handy law.gov site, hit Researcher Resources right here at the top of the page, and then that'll bring you to Research Guides here on the left. You can search the subjects of each of the guides by subject on this page, or if you click this link here at the top that says Research Guides, it'll bring you to a full list of the guides so you can see them all in one list. And that looks something like this. Once again, we've included the URL for the list format of the research guides here at the top, and we'll drop the link in the chat as well. You can search these guides in multiple ways, including browsing the alphabetical list, which is the default. You can also search by subject or by all guides, or you can use a keyword search that limits your search to just these 331 guides. You can also select the I in a circle next to each title to learn more about that particular guide. I also want to point out that the law can often be state or country specific, which is why the library has created a Guide to Law Online series of research guides with links to legal resources organized by jurisdiction or region. We've added the URL link to this series in the slide, and we'll also post it in the chat so you can pull it up that way if you'd like. As you can see here, we have broken the Guide to Law Online down into nations of the world and the United States, and you'll find there's a guide for each US state and territory, as well as countries from Afghanistan to Zimbabwe if you find yourself in need of some international legal research assistance. Today, we'll be keeping our focus on US law, and we'll be using the Law Library's Legal Research, a Guide to Secondary Resources as a roadmap for our presentation. This guide was specifically created to familiarize researchers with the different types of secondary resources available and how to use them. We've included the URL for this guide at the bottom of the slide, and we'll also provide a link in the chat so that you can follow along and refer to this resource later. You'll see on the navigation panel here on the left that the first resource that we're going to be looking at today are definitions. As you'll recall, and as you can see here from the funnel, which you'll get very familiar with over the course of this presentation, legal dictionaries are at the top of the legal research funnel that Olivia showed you earlier, and this is because they are some of the very first resources you should consult when starting your legal research. Because, let's face it, even just reading the text of the law can be tricky, let alone trying to apply it. If you've done any sort of legal research before, or maybe you've heard about legal cases in the news, or even just watched a popular legal TV show, you know that the law sometimes uses its own language of Latin, legalese, and even seemingly regular words that can take on different meaning in the law. And I've included some common and not so common examples here. As a general rule, if you come across a word that you're not familiar with, or you're unsure why it's being used in that specific context, it's a good idea to look it up. And in fact, I had a professor in law school who used to quiz us on every new word we read in a case just to make the point that in order to understand the law, you first have to understand the meaning behind the words used to write the law. Now you may be thinking, this is really a really basic idea, and you're already familiar with looking up new words in the dictionary. And you'd be right. This is Basic Research 101, and the process of looking up definitions isn't really something new. The key difference to this process, though, when it comes to legal research, is making sure that you're using a legal dictionary. The most popular or widely used dictionary is Black's Law Dictionary, but there are several different dictionaries that you can use. The picture here shows some of the options available in the Law Library's reading room. And pull up my annotation tool again. You can see the one right here on the far left. That's Black's Law Dictionary. We actually have 2 copies available in the Law Library reading room. You'll find that many legal dictionaries are only available in print or through subscription databases, but you should be able to access these materials at a legal or research library near you. Additionally, there are some free resources available online, like NOLO's Free Dictionary and Cornell Law School's WEX Dictionary and Encyclopedia. These resources are linked in the guide, and we've also included them here on the slide. We'll take a look at the WEX Dictionary now to highlight the importance of using a legal dictionary, especially where you may think you know what a word means. Truthfully, the Latin and legalese can be pretty easy to spot, like the examples we saw on our previous slide, but sometimes familiar words can have a different meaning entirely in the legal context, which is why it's important to use a legal dictionary. Take, for example, the word consideration. Here you can see the Merriam-Webster definition of consideration, meaning continuous and careful thought, which is what many of us may think of when we hear the word. It's not until you go down to the very last definition on Merriam-Webster that you get a hint of its legal meaning. Now compare that to the definition available on WEX, which provides more context and meaning for its legal usage by explaining that consideration is a promise, performance, or forbearance bargained by the promiser in exchange for their promise, and that consideration is the main element of a contract. The legal definition also helpfully points out that without consideration by both parties, a contract cannot be enforceable. Now, consideration is a pretty big deal in contracts, and its meaning as shown here is very different from its common meaning of continuous, careful thought. So just remember, when in doubt, look it up in a legal dictionary. Another useful resource for finding legal definitions is words and phrases. a multi-volume resource published by West and available in print in the Law Library Reading Room, as shown here, as well as online through the subscription database Westlaw. Similar to a legal dictionary, Words and Phrases provides legal definitions, but it does so by using definitions that can be found verbatim in case law. For example, if you were to look up consideration in Words and Phrases, you'll actually find 87 pages worth of definitions that look something like this, with each definition coming from a specific case. For example, this definition here came from the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals for a case out of Indiana in 1997. And if we take a closer look at this very tiny text, we can see that not only does it define consideration, but it also provides a citation to the case of Gibson v. Neighborhood Health Clinics. My annotation tool on again right here. So right here, you'll see this is the case, Gibson v. Neighborhood Health Clinics, with the citation information. And that is the actual case where this definition comes from. So if we're using Words and Phrases, not only do you now have a definition of consideration, you also have a case you can cite to in your pleadings if you're filing in Indiana. Pass it back to Olivia here to talk about legal encyclopedias.
Thanks, Linnea. All right, so next up we have legal encyclopedias in our little funnel here. Next slide. Legal encyclopedias offer a broad and general commentary on a wide range of federal and state law. These secondary sources provide an overview of legal topics with citations to some primary law, such as case law. However, they do not contain extensive citations to statutes or other secondary sources. There are two national legal encyclopedias used by members of the legal profession, which include the Corpus Juris Secundum, which we refer to as the CJS, and the American Jurisprudence, which we refer to as AmJur. And you may notice here that there's a little 2D at the end of AmJur, and that just refers to the second edition. There are also two encyclopedias geared towards non-legal professionals, which include the Gale Encyclopedia of American Law, which explains legal terms and concepts in everyday language and provides a practical rather than theoretical approach to the law. In addition, this resource provides a general background and explanation of legal issues and educates the user on federal and state local laws, including statutes, cases, and regulations. And one thing to note is that this resource is widely available in many public libraries. The other encyclopedia is NOLA's Encyclopedia of Everyday Law, which provides concise, plain English answers to hundreds of the most frequently asked legal questions about everyday issues. So, for example, landlord-tenant, selling a house, copyright infringement, debt collections, even adopting a child, or issues you may have with neighbors. Next slide. So here is a visual of one of the physical volumes of the AmJur, which you can see here covers contract law, which we also have available in the Law Library Reading Room. So as Linnea mentioned previously, consideration is an element of a contract. So let's say that you looked up the definition of consideration in a legal dictionary, and then you wanted to find cases that discussed consideration. Well, you could use Words and Phrases like Linnea showed you, but you could also use the AmJur. And if you looked at this particular legal encyclopedia, you would be able to find several examples of cases. So I couldn't get all the text in one image, so I split it up so you could see here. And at the bottom, at what would be the bottom of this page in the footnote, references to cases such as, and I'm gonna get my little annotation tool out here, such as Cigna Health and Life Insurance Company versus Audax Health Solutions. And then we also have here AM General LC versus Armor. Okay, next slide. So let's say you wanted to view a digital version of a legal encyclopedia. Well, you can do so through subscription databases. And many public law libraries provide public access to these types of databases. For example, here in the law library, we provide public access to a variety of different databases. You can find a list of these databases by going to our main page, law.gov, which you can see here, and then selecting Researcher Resources at the top of the page. Next slide. So next, you will be brought to this following page, and if you look to the left side of the page, you will see databases. Finally, you will be brought to our list of subscription databases. Now, you can see here, under General, we provide access to subscription databases such as Bloomberg and Hein Online, and we also note the availability here. So for example, Bloomberg can only be accessed on one computer. We also provide access to Nexus and Westlaw, which, as you can see here, includes access to secondary sources. So you will see that in the little description here, secondary sources, and I'm just gonna circle that for you on Westlaw. And in Westlaw particularly, we provide access to legal encyclopedias, which you will see right here. Next slide. So let's walk through how to locate legal encyclopedias from the homepage of Westlaw. So first, what you're going to do is click on secondary sources. Then you will see a list of publications, and you would select jurisprudence and encyclopedias. Here you will find a list of publications which include the AmJur and the CJS. Now, if you were to select AmJur from this list, you would be able to find the exact information I displayed from the physical copy. Next slide. So let's say you selected AmJur. You would find a list of subjects such as adoption, bankruptcy, and contracts. So I fast forward a couple steps here on this slide, but as you can see, you can expand these subject areas to more narrower topics of research. So I selected contracts, then formation of contracts, and then consideration. So here you will see that this is the exact information from the physical copy. However, the neat thing about using a database is that the footnotes will provide direct links to the cited cases. So if you select footnote 2, you would be brought to the bottom of the page where you would see all the citations in the same cases listed in the physical copy, which includes, here you can see, again, Cigna Health and Life Insurance Company versus Audax Health Solutions, and AM General LC versus Armor. So if you were to click on the hyperlinked citation, it would direct you to this exact case. So for example, Cigna Health and Life Insurance Company versus Audax Health Solutions. And we're going to see that on the next slide. So here you can see the case for the Cigna Health and Life Insurance Company. And then you could read it and have that information, which is really neat and easy. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to take a little break to do a poll, and I'm going to set that up for you in just one moment. Okay, so the question here is, which one would you not use to find a legal definition? And we'll give you just a few seconds to answer this poll. Okay, I think we've gotten a good amount of results. So give me 1 second here. Okay, so it looks like most of you chose Merriam-Webster, which would be the answer uh, to um, what not to use. But I do see that we picked, there was a few of you picked some of the other ones. So it is true that uh, you may not want to go to, let's see here, 1 second. So all of these would be great resources, but you wouldn't want to use Merriam-Webster probably wouldn't be the first one you would want to use, just to explain how this answer is correct, is because you may find a definition, but it won't be as in detail as Black's Law Dictionary or the other resources which are geared towards the law. So that is the answer for that. So I'm going to stop sharing this. Or I think now you can see the results. Sorry, I did not share that first. Okay, so now everyone knows. Okay, and now I'm going to stop sharing and we're gonna move on. Back to you, Linnea.
So next up is going to be books and binders, which is part of your presentation, Olivia. You want to dive in,
I
talking
do
about the
want to dive
books and
in. Yes,
binders?
sorry, I got a little. Yes, that's me. Okay, so books and binders. Okay, so books include treatises, hornbooks, and nutshells, while a binder would include a loose leaf. So treatises are in-depth treatments of single subjects that provide exhaustive coverage of an area of the law. And a treatise is similar to an encyclopedia in that it methodically outlines the basic aspects of legal doctrine. However, it focuses on a specific subject, which means it can provide greater depth and insight. So, treatises are publications that present a highly organized and detailed explanation of a specific area of law. For example, contract, tort, criminal, or property law. And they're often multi-volumes, usually written by an expert practitioner or professor in the subject area. Here we have an example of Farnsworth on contracts, which I hope my annotation tool is working, but you can see it. I have an example of that over on the right-hand side. Horn books provide the basics of a given legal topic, usually one volume, most often written by a law professor, geared towards students. So here I have provided an example, again on the right-hand side, an example of an environmental law horn book. And then a nutshell provides less detail, but are very concise. They are small one-volume books with fewest citations to primary law, geared towards students or for a quick introduction. And if you're curious, the term nutshell is a Publishers West trademark. So I often start people with nutshells when they are unfamiliar with an area of the law. And just to give you a bit of reference, in our collection, we have about 180 nutshells. So these little one-volume books cover many different topics and can be super helpful. And then loose leaves, which I don't have an example on the slide, but loose leaves compile statutes and regulations on one area of the law. Loose leaves are similar to treatises in that they are in-depth treatments of an area of law, but are published in binders so they can be quickly updated by inserting new pages and or by removing some of the existing pages. So these publications generally include regulation-intensive subjects such as banking or tax or Medicare or securities. And all of these areas of law and corresponding regulations change very frequently. And one thing to note is many loose leaves are historically available in print and are now migrating to online access via subscription databases. For example, the BNA merged with Bloomberg, And often patrons will ask for the BNA tax portfolios, which are now available in the subscription database Bloomberg, which, as I stated previously, we provide public access to in the Law Library Reading Room. Next slide. So as highlighted in the previous slide, these types of secondary sources are also available in subscription databases such as Bloomberg and also Westlaw. For example, if we go back to this database, Westlaw, we will find under secondary sources, texts, and treatises. Again, I have altered these screenshots. So for example, if you were interested in looking for treatises on environmental law, you would select E from the list here and find a list of texts and treatises that cover a variety of topics, such as environmental law. So as you'll see here on the next slide. So let's say you wanted a brief understanding of a particular resource from this list. Well, you could click on the I for more information, for more details. So for environmental law, if you clicked the I icon, you will see this is a treatise that contains background on environmental law and science, also updates on statutes and regulation, which are primary authority, and practical approaches to resolving issues. So finally, if we go one step further and select the environmental law treatise, you will find a variety of chapters that narrow into very specific areas of environmental law, from climate litigation to tribal environmental dynamics. Next slide. And so now I am going to hand you off to Linnea.
Great. So Olivia just walked you all through some different types of books and binders, including treatises, but one specific type of treatise that's worth looking at in more detail as you work your way through your research funnel are restatements of the law. Restatements of the law are authoritative summaries of common law, which are compiled by legal scholars and practitioners and published by the American Law Institute. They're a unique resource in that they provide the text of legal provisions along with official commentary, hypothetical illustrations, and notes. The volumes you can see on the slide here are from the Restatement of the Law Second on Contracts, which is available in the Law Library Reading Room. And here again, you can see, I'll highlight it here for you with my handy tool. You can see once again that 2D notation that Olivia showed you previously with regards to Amjur. That's once again just referring to the fact that this is the second edition of the Restatement of the Law on Contracts. So while it may be missing that 2ND that you see in most non-legal sources, we are consistent across legal materials with the shorthand that we use, by and large. Restatements also cover a variety of other subjects, as shown here. They are intended to clarify and simplify existing legal doctrines, including relevant cases and the required elements for legal causes of action. They're available both in print and online through subscription databases. Electronic versions are available on Nexus, Uni, and Westlaw, and these versions link to other materials within those databases. There's also scanned versions that are like in PDF format through Hein Online, which is another database that we'll look at. Restatements are probably the most authoritative of secondary sources, and in fact, sometimes you'll see them cited by judges in court opinions. But just to be clear, restatements are definitely still secondary sources, meaning they aren't the law, and they don't have legal binding authority. As an example, though, of how you might use a restatement, let's take a look at the word consideration again. The Wex Legal Dictionary gave us the definition you see here on the slide, along with a couple paragraphs of additional material. If you weren't familiar with this term, the information provided here is a good place to start. What if you already knew about consideration, or if you needed more detail on the subject than is provided here? That's when the restatement can be helpful. In fact, you can even see here that the Wex Dictionary even cites, too, the Restatement of Second of Contracts. Now, I will note, though, that while it does appear to be a link here in the underlined statement on Wex, that actually will only bring you to a definition of restatements, which makes sense, right? Because we're in a dictionary. If you wanted to actually see the restatement and what it said about consideration, you'd need to check the restatement itself in print or online through a subscription database. For example, on the screen here is a photo of the print copy of the first volume of the Restatement of the Law, Second on Contracts. The image on the right, all of this is part of the index. And you can see here that chapter 4, the entirety of it is about the formation of contracts and specifically consideration. So this is just kind of broadening our approach to consideration, because in Weck's dictionary, we had a couple of paragraphs, and now we have enough on the topic to merit an entire chapter. So in addition to the print copy, I'll also show you what this looks like through one of the subscription databases on the next slide. So this is another database that we have here on site called Nexus Uni, and we have access to it here in the law library, or maybe potentially at a law or research library near you. It has an electronic copy of the restatement of the law on contracts, where again you can see that chapter 4 is all about consideration. And if you click on each of the plus signs, you would be brought to a page that looks like this, that lists each of the topics out. For example, topic 1, the requirement of consideration, covers all these topics here. And if we were to click on section 71, requirement of exchange, types of exchange, we'll see the restatement itself, which is in bold at the top of the page. Now, if we were to scroll to the bottom of the page, we would find the comments on the restatement, as well as illustrations which show how that principle is used in context. So if you're looking for more information and detail on a specific subject, the restatements can be a very useful resource. Just remember, a restatement, like the name implies, only restates the law and is not the law. So we've covered a couple additional resources here, so it's a great time to run another poll and make sure that we're all still on the same page. So I'm going to launch poll number 2 on secondary sources. And you should be able to see on the screen your poll. If it doesn't automatically pop up for you, if you go to the bottom of the Zoom page, you'll see a button that says polls/quizzes, and that'll open it up. And our question here is, what is the most authoritative secondary source that sometimes gets cited by courts, but is still not the law? Great. Glad to see you guys are all still hanging with us. It looks like we've got some good results. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll now. And I'm going to share the results so you can all take a look together. By and large, this is a slightly tricky question because what you see here, the American jurisprudence, the legal dictionary, restatement of the law, and in a nutshell, are in fact all secondary sources, just with different levels of authority. The restatement of the law is the most authoritative, and it does get cited. But funnily enough, our results actually do kind of show the funneling effect of authoritative sources, because next down would in fact be American jurisprudence. And after that would get down to the Weck's legal dictionary in a nutshell, which they all serve the same purpose of getting you familiar with an area of law. They just sometimes get a little bit more weight than some of the others. Okay, let's get back into our slides here so we can keep rolling along with our secondary sources. And in fact, we're going to go even a little bit narrower, get down to the very bottom of our funnel and talk about articles. They're great for looking at specific areas or questions of law. Legal articles are generally published in legal periodicals, and you'll find that they come in a variety of shapes and sizes, including legal journals, law reviews, which are journals published by law schools, bar journals published by organizations like the American Bar Association, commercial journals, newspapers, and annotated law reports. They can include discussions of current legal issues, trends, and commentary from attorneys, or be a little bit more scholarly in nature and feature case analysis, historical reviews, and empirical studies written by academics or legal professionals. Legal periodicals can also include information like lawyer profiles, book reviews, and other non-legal information that may be useful to your research. We frequently refer people to legal articles because they can provide up-to-date information, diverse perspectives, in-depth analysis, and importantly, citations to other secondary sources and primary sources of law to continue your research. It can also be an invaluable starting point for more specific areas of research, because you may just find that someone has researched the very issue you're interested in and, handedly, publish an article on it. We see this a lot with historical research, as well as for more current or developing areas of law that maybe haven't had time for a whole book to be published on them just yet, like, for example, with artificial intelligence, which is still relatively a newcomer on the scene. Although legal articles are still published in print, as you saw on the previous slide, some of the covers of those print publications, you'll find that many, if not all of them, can also be found in online subscription databases. The list you see here comes from our handy guide to secondary resources and is an example of just some of the different subscription resources that contain legal periodicals. Access to the resources you see here is limited to patrons on site at the Library of Congress, but you may be able to access these or similar databases at a research or academic library near you. And just as an example of how these resources work and what you can expect to find, we're going to take a look at one of my favorites, Hein Online, which has one of the largest databases of legal articles. So if you were on site here at the library and you were to click on the link in the guide, it'd bring you to the homepage for the Law Journal Library on Hein Online. If we zoom in a bit here, you can see that the keyword search bar at the top, it allows you to search all of the law journals in Hein Online's databases, or you could also use the filters here to search by title, state, author, or other parameters to narrow your search. Finally, if we were to take a look at the first couple of journals, which are organized here in alphabetical order, you can see examples of journals from AAALL, which is the American Association of Law Libraries, as well as from the ABA, which is the American Bar Association, a professional association for attorneys. Now, we're only scratching the surface here because I did say it is the largest collection of law journals. And we could probably talk all day about all the different materials that covers, but we want to make sure we cover a couple of the others as well so that you have many different options. For example, let's take a look again at the subscription database Westlaw, which you can access here in the Law Library Reading Room. Now, earlier, Olivia showed you how you can find legal encyclopedias on Westlaw, and it's pretty much the same process for articles. You'll come to this homepage, click secondary sources right there in the middle of the page, which will direct you to this page, which outlines the different types of secondary sources available through the site. So not only does Westlaw have encyclopedias listed here, it also has law reviews and journals, and another important source of legal articles, which is the American Law Reports. Now, the American Law Reports are one of the most comprehensive publication of annotated law reports, which are great for analyzing and discussing particular points of law. Similar to Hein Online, you can run keyword searches using the very convenient search bar at the top, and that'll limit your search to only the American Law Reports. Or you could also use any of the links shown here, and that'll bring you to those specific subjects within the American Law Reports. We also have a print copy of the American Law Reports in the Law Library Reading Room if you prefer getting your hands on a copy of the law, or on the copy of the secondary source about the law, of course, because that's what we're talking about here. Now, I know we've covered several different subscription databases for articles that are available here at the library. But what if you're not able to visit us here in DC? One option is, of course, to visit a legal or academic library near you. And fortunately, the Library's Guide to Law Online series, which we took a look at earlier, can help you with locating a nearby library. The page on the screen here is where you can find all of the US state and territory guides. And we've included the link to the URL on the slide, and we'll also drop it in the chat if you want to take a look at the guide now for your state. It's kind of be fun to poke around and get some context for the law. Since I'm from Florida, I went ahead and pulled up the Guide to Law Online for Florida. And once you've opened the guide, the tab that says Legal Guides here on the left will bring you to this page, which has a list of law schools and their associated law libraries. And if you scroll a little bit further down that page, you'll see this list of other helpful resources, which has a tab you can see right here. I've already selected it, but this tab, it'll say Law Libraries, and it'll link you to other law libraries within that state. Each of the guides for each of the different states and territories includes a similar structure of both university law libraries as well as other state law libraries that you may be able to visit. And if visiting one of these libraries is an option for you, we definitely recommend calling ahead to confirm public availability and access to their online or print resources. And if you're not able to visit the Law Library of Congress or another law library near you, there are also free resources that you can use to search for legal articles, including Law Review Commons and Google Scholar. These resources are linked in the guide, and we've also included them on the slide here. Now, candidly, these resources have more limited search functionality and other limitations within them compared to subscription databases, but you can still find good articles through both sites. It may just take a bit more searching. For example, Google Scholar is a search engine for scholarly literature and has a search bar similar to the one you might be familiar with from using Google. A little different here is not only does it say Google Scholar, but you can see right here in the middle, you can limit your search both to either to articles or case law. Again, since we're starting with our secondary sources, we'll look at articles, but something to keep in mind later if you also need to do some case law research. So let's say we were to run an example of our articles using the big search bar. And if you ran a search for patent law, it might look something like this. You can see here, it gives a list of legal articles with links to where they can be found online, including if there's a PDF copy available, which you can see here on the far right. A word of caution though, when using Google Scholar, sometimes the results will still link you back to those subscription resources. So it's not a guarantee that you'll be able to access all of the results from your computer at home. You may still need to visit a library to gain full access to these resources. Another useful tool to look for resources and articles, which is also linked on our guide, are the CRS reports. CRS, or the Congressional Research Service, is a separate division here at the library that provides comprehensive legislative research and analysis for Congress. As part of this service, they author a variety of reports, many of which are available to the public at crsreports.congress.gov. We've included the URL for the page here at the bottom of the slide, and we'll also drop it in the chat for you. Much like other article databases, you can run keyword searches for CRS reports by using the search bar that's right here in the middle of the page. Handedly, the format kind of looks the same, even though the rest of the dressing is a little different. So if we were to run our same search here for patent law that we ran through Google Scholar, we'd get a list of different reports authored by CRS on the subject of patent law, including helpful resources like this one right here in the middle, Patent Law, a Handbook for Congress, among others that you see listed on the page. Now, if you were to open this particular report, you'd see it covers the subject of patents in some depth and also helpfully provides footnotes like the ones shown here, showing where the information in the report comes from. CRS reports are a great secondary resource because although they're not the law, again, because we're still dealing with secondary sources, they are used by Congress when making the law and can provide insight and other links to further your research. So now that we've reached the bottom of our funnel, we still have more to cover, but let's make sure that we're still following along our funnel and look at our third poll here. All right, so you should have that pop up on your screen, or if not, it'll be available through that polls and questions page at the bottom of your box, of your Zoom box. And it says, if you're interested in researching a new or developing area of law, what resources may be useful? I'll give you a couple seconds to go explore those answers. I'm happy to see there's a lot of you guys still engaged and following along with us. So let's end the poll here. Take a look see the results that we've got. And congratulations, everybody is right. Because while all of the above does include secondary sources for new and developing an area of law, you can find all of these resources, in fact, in bar journals, law reviews, and American law reports, depending on which resources are easily accessed for you. But they are all sources for articles that can give you new and updated information about the law. So let's jump back into our PowerPoint and talk about legal directories.
Okay, thanks, Linnea. Okay, so the last secondary source we are going to be discussing is legal directories. And these can be very helpful when you've gotten to a place in your research that you may need legal assistance or you may need to find where you can find legal assistance. Next slide. So, legal directories are locators for legal and government information. A variety of resources provide information about attorneys, law firms, legal experts, professors, government officers, corporate legal departments, legal aid organizations, and elected officials. So for example, the Federal Regulatory Directory is a comprehensive guide to federal regulatory agencies. It also includes citations to laws under which agencies derive their regulatory responsibilities. The United States Government Manual is the official directory of federal agencies. These entries include a description of responsibilities of the agency, contacts, and references to the legislation that established the agency. And then on this list, the most popular legal directory is Martindale-Hubbell Law Directory, which provides a listing of attorneys and law firms by state and other countries. The Martindale-Hubbell website also allows for searches of lawyer by lawyer, practice area, or geographic location. And specialty directories include information about lawyers practicing in a specific area of law and or in a specific jurisdiction. Next slide. If you visit our research guide on secondary sources, you will see that we provide a list of directories. So in print and online, and you can also access the Martindale-Hubbell website for free online, and you can access the United States Government Manual for free on govinfo.gov. Next slide. Another free resource is lawhelp.org, which provides referrals to nonprofit legal aid organizations in every state and territory. And this is a resource that we provide for our patrons here at the Law Library all the time. And here I provided a screenshot from lawhelp.org. Next slide. So for example, if you were to select California, you can use the filters above to narrow your search. So for example, as you see here on the slide, my annotation tool is not working, but if you look to the middle of the slide, you can see a drop-down menu for a legal topic. And some legal aid groups focus on specific legal topics such as disability or health, which can be very, very helpful when you're trying to narrow your resources. So you can see here, you can choose a specific location within California and then a specific legal topic and find results for your legal research needs that way.
So we've covered quite a bit of information over the last 40 minutes or so. And to recap and make sure that we followed you along that roadmap we originally laid out, first question we looked at today are what are secondary resources? Hopefully by now you guys are all familiar now with a good list of them, but they include legal dictionaries, encyclopedias, books, restatements, articles, and directories, each of which offer different levels of analysis, commentary, or restatements of primary legal authority and are used to help locate and explain primary sources of law. When do we use these resources? We recommend starting your research with secondary resources so you can understand the big picture and get some background and context before narrowing in on primary sources. How can we get access to secondary resources? They could be accessed in a variety of formats, both in print and online, through either free or subscription-based databases. The ones we showed you today are all available in the Law Library of Congress here in DC, but they may also be available at a legal or research library near you. And finally, when starting your next legal research project, we recommend keeping the library's legal research, a guide to secondary resources handy, so you can use that research funnel and make sure you're getting all of the information you need before starting your research into primary law.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of our presentation. If you have questions, please submit them through Q&A. I know that a few of you have already. So as always, if you need research assistance, please feel free to contact us here at the Law Library of Congress using our Ask a Librarian service available through the link here or via the button on our homepage, law.gov. And we're going to do one more poll while we read through your Q&A questions, and I will provide that right now. So if you have any additional questions about getting started in legal research, what should you do?
Happy to see so many of you that are chiming in to talk about asking a librarian. Because that's what we're here for, right, Olivia?
That is what we are here for. And I know we had, all the answers are correct. So you guys are all 100%, but we did get a question about certificates of participation. And we just want to be just to clear that up, that we don't give them out, but we will be sending an email to all attendees with the recording and slides if you need proof of attendance. So just to clear that up. All right. Linnea, did you want to answer any of these out loud or?
Sure. I'll take a couple of them. It looks like you guys appreciated our presentation today. Thanks again for attending. One question we have here is how long does it take to get a response when sending an email? If you're using our Ask a Librarian service on law.gov, we typically estimate between 3 to 5 business days to get a response. Sometimes you'll get them faster, just depending on how many other people have asked questions and depending on the complexity of your research. So on average, though, you can expect 3 to 5 business days. Oh, I also see another question here that says, if we wish to find more on patent or trademark law, is there a common secondary source or nutshell? It's a great question. And yes to both. There are nutshells on patent law, on trademark law. There's also a nutshell on intellectual property law in general. There's also treatises on each of these areas of law, which are very specific. And so there are 2 separate publications. You can see them in the law library. And in fact, if you go to our page on research guides, there is a guide currently on patent law, which has all of those secondary resources linked to the guide for you. It also includes links to secondary sources that you can find on the USPTO's website. We also are developing an additional guide on trademark law that should be forthcoming that will have similar resources linked. So great question and very timely. Great. Oh, got a comment looking like someone is familiar with some other databases, but learned about some new ones today. So glad to see that we could introduce you to some more. There's always more to explore with the law, and there's new ones coming out all the time. So definitely a good idea to keep coming back for more webinars with us so we can bring you the latest and greatest. Um, Here's a good one about we got a couple questions about restatements, Olivia, if you want to take a look at those.
Yeah, I see one here. Let me see. 1 second. I think we have a few more minutes. 1 sec.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks like one of the questions is asking if restatements are a summary of common law. The question is it only common law? And by and large, yes, it is common law. It's to fill that void that may not exist for some common law principles like contracts that, for other areas of law, there might be statutes or other sources of legal authority to refer to. Would you agree with that, Olivia?
Yeah, and then so you just answered like what a restatement is, and then right, and then
Yeah,
and then the treatises are going to be more in-depth, like summaries of the law and provide more um will provide citations to primary authority and things like that. So they differ in that way.
yeah.
But if
I mean,
you have more questions about that, you should look at the research guide, which will give you detail.
yeah. And kind of the like Olivia was driving at, the difference is that um, a restatement is kind of like the square and a rectangle, right? A restatement is a type of treatises, but treatise can include more than just a restatement. And restatements are unique in that they fill that void for common law and can have a little bit more weight than a treatise. If you didn't have anything else and you had to cite to something, you'd probably want to get to a restatement as opposed to a treatise.
That's a very good point. Yes. All right. Well, with 1 more minute here, again, if you have any other questions, please, please, please send us a question on Ask a Librarian